Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, Charles.
Welcome back from your writing retreat. Do I call it a writing retreat? I mean, do you go in a
No,
shed? Do you go in a garret, a man cave, bat cave?
nothing so glamorous. I mean, the one thing about writing the life story of Chris Simpson and the prog folk rock pop band Magna Carta, which is now in
Mm.
its fourth year, the one thing I've learned is that unless you've got a cottage in your back garden, or you can afford to take 6 months off to go and write in a caravan in the Norfolk Broads, it's very hard to write a full book whilst you're holding a job down and you're at home and living in a small house. So I went back to my mum's in Scotland because I could get complete peace and quiet. So I made good progress and I learned quite a lot about Chris Simpson, including some tales of his from the days when Magna Carta, which went on and off for 20 years, they
Mm.
represented Britain via the British Council in foreign tours around the globe, including South America, the Middle East, Asia, and and they got it because of a friend of a friend after they played a festival in Norway in the late 1970s. It's always like personal contacts, and it was a good money spinner, and they got treated like royalty by the British Council. And the British ambassador, each country they turned up in, or the consul, would invite them to a lavish reception. They were treated like major rock stars, and everybody loved them. And they had a great time. Whilst they became completely obscure in Britain, they were bigger than ever abroad. But the only problem with that was they occasionally had to play some dodgy places. So at one point they were playing East Jerusalem, another point they were playing in the Gaza Strip. So Magna Carta played a live gig at a university in the Gaza Strip, and there was a riot.
Because of them, or there was just a riot anyway?
Well, because they were doing it for the British consul, they were representing Britain. Now Britain's tried to steer a line between the two sides most of the time in the whole
Not
history
at
of
the
the
moment.
conflict. Yeah, I know what you mean, but each side still thinks Britain doesn't support it enough. So the
Mm.
PLO and Palestinians, the strongest ones, have never thought the British supported them enough. So when they were actually driving to the gig, there was like cars set alight on the neighbouring hill, and then
Oh.
when they arrived at the venue, people started throwing stones at them. So it was like militant Palestinians who just thought they were representing British imperialism. So when they actually got on the stage, some of the more militant members of the crowd stormed the stage and grabbed Chris Simpson by the arm and started to make a speech on the microphone about how he likes them in their back, like we're a bit on the spot. So Chris grabbed the phone off
Mm.
him. He said, "Stop this! Stop this! We've brought songs of peace and songs of love, nothing else."
Mm.
Like the rock star of the '60s he was. It's, and supposedly that calmed him down, and it all went well after that.
Maybe the name Magna Carta didn't help either. That's always going to be divisive.
Well, I'm not sure the rest of the world actually knows what Magna Carta is in general, unless you're an academic. It's not. I don't think it's a big thing abroad.
Mm. So, in fact, it was academic, wasn't it? It was neither here nor there on that occasion. So the gig
Exactly.
eventually went off comparatively peacefully.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But on the other hand, when they played East Jerusalem, the Israeli authorities tried to stop the gig because
Because?
Magna Carta. They saw Magna Carta is coming along to support the Palestinians by playing in East Jerusalem. So they were stopping them at roadblocks. They were confiscating their music gear, their equipment. And so Chris Simpson, being Chris Simpson, he's a charming character, but also not to be trifled with. He
Yeah.
just grabbed the guy from British Council and said, "Look, if you don't make sure this gig happens, there's going to be a diplomatic incident." And so the
That's a
gig
hell of a line,
happened.
that is, Graham. I'm impressed by that
Mhm.
line. Throwing the
Mhm.
words
Yeah,
diplomatic
yeah, yeah.
incident in.
Yeah. He may have written a huge amount of fantastic songs in this sort of broadly
Mm.
folk rock genre, but he's a when it comes to his character, he's a real rock and roller, old school.
I mean, the British Council tours still take place. Perhaps more often we associate them with theatre tours to gentle theatre tours to Italy or whatever. And it's
Mm.
interesting that in this situation, they were not seeking to take sides. They were not seeking in any way to be controversial. And yet, because of course, as soon as you go to the Middle East, all these complexities happen, and Britain's defined, well, the definition of what Britain is in some ways up for debate over here, but it seems to be more cemented, actually, if you like, on both sides of an argument. There, they have an idea that Britain isn't doing its job and doesn't support either side enough. And yet, of course, if you come in peace to perform music, I mean, that's a good thing to be doing, but it seems to have been fraught with danger to try and do that. Were they a
But I
bit
always
naive to
believe
go?
no, because being representing the British Council, at the same time they had the protection of Britain. They were almost there flying the flag for Great Britain
Yeah.
as like
Yes.
musical ambassadors. So there was a degree of like they weren't just a rock band playing in the Middle East or
No.
Bangladesh or Costa Rica, wherever they went.
Mm.
They were
Mm.
like under the protection of the British government to some degree.
Mm.
But I'm always a firm believer that it's very tricky situations. As the old Carry On film joke said, 1 minute it's peace on, next minute it's peace off.
Yeah, it takes a carry-on film to sum up the world of politics so precisely. So, Graham, just as a matter of record, how far
Hmm.
along? It took a long time for the Magna Carta to be signed. Just wondering, how far now from completion is your book devoted to the alternative Magna Carta?
Well, until the laptop started malfunctioning yesterday, I
Oh
got
no!
to the point where I was 2 chapters and an outro away from finishing it, and I would have been 1 chapter and an outro from finishing it, but sadly the laptop, which, like most of my most of my technology, is a little bit old, so
So
it
it
affected
didn't.
work.
It wasn't that it had a mind of its own, and it just thought, I can't take any more. I can't take any more of Magna Carta. That's it.
Well, I think it is a bit tired, full stop. It's a tired old laptop.
Yeah.
But the book's
Yeah.
not an epic book. I don't foresee it being more than 50,000 words or 60,000 words, which
No. No.
for a non-fiction story isn't like hugely long. But I didn't want it to be too long anyway, because although he's sold 9 million copies of albums in his life,
Mm.
and for about 6, 7 years was genuinely reasonably big in the
Mm.
British rock scene after he left Harrogate to go to college in London in the early 1960s.
Yeah.
He hasn't been famous in Britain now for decades. So
No.
I didn't see the point of like doing a 3 volume, 400,000 words history, because I want people to read the book who've never heard of Magna Carta or Chris Simpson. And I want them to read it because it's worth reading.
Is that the? I mean, obviously, one takes a position when writing a book. You think, right, how am I going to steer the reader through this? What do I want to tell them? What's the purpose behind this book? Which, again, from your point of view, actually, as well. Although, I mean, you've met him, obviously interviewed him, etc. For you, there's an element of journey of discovery as well, I guess, in writing the book. As you progress, you learn more and more about him.
Yeah, but you end up trying to work out, is he in the right? Is he in the wrong? Did he do the right thing? Did he do the wrong thing? Am I representing his character properly?
Mm.
Never mind the facts. Establishing the facts itself is tricky enough to get the
Yes.
chronology and timeline. But then, how do you judge his behavior? And you got to be fair to him. But at the same time, you don't want to like write some bit of propaganda. So I've tried to write the book as well as having lots of factual information
Mm.
and nice stories and anecdotes, because he's got loads and loads of anecdotes about famous encounters and
Mm.
interesting happenings.
Mm.
As well as doing that, I want to be like a discussion about his life and his music. So
Mm.
you're sort of working out why his music's good, why it works or doesn't quite work, how it changes, what effect his character had on his career, what decisions went right, why that didn't work. It's like a discussion inside a history.
It's biography rather than autobiography. It's just to clear that up, isn't it, Graham? It's not one where you'll show it to Chris before it goes to
I know, I'll
publication.
definitely show it, partly
You will.
out of
You will.
respect for
Okay.
Chris, but also
Okay.
he's got
Yes.
the contacts in the world of publishing, which I haven't
Right.
really got.
Yes.
So it makes complete sense. So for all I know, when I hand over the first draft
Mm.
for Chris to have a look himself, he
Mm.
might like dislike certain parts or disagree. You never know.
I think that's kind of almost inevitable. I always find that um, sometimes with an interview that one's done, and it's your interpretation, if you like, of that person from maybe a phone
Mm,
interview, maybe a face-to-face, and it is an interpretation. Yes, it's using the quotes that they gave, but there is still an element of you interpreting, and it becomes you on that person as opposed to them on themselves. And I don't think,
mm,
I mean, I'm entirely in favor of that. I think that's where it's interesting, is how a journalist reads someone and interprets them, and how they tell that story. But invariably, there's just from time to time there'll be a clash where someone says, I don't think of myself like that. I don't think that's how I
mm,
represented
mm,
myself in the interview or whatever. So
mm.
magnify that by then actually doing a whole
Magnify
biography.
like it.
Yeah,
Yeah, magnify.
magnify. That's
I
even
might
more
that's
likely
the
to
book
happen.
title.
Yeah. But I mean, that's almost inevitable, isn't it?
Well, there's a
I mean,
couple of problems with
I
that.
reckon that one day
Yeah.
Chris would read this and he might think one thing, and then another day he might read it and think differently. I think he's that kind of person, isn't he?
Completely, but there's a couple of problems as you will know when you interview someone, especially this was a
Yes.
lengthy series of interviews over a long period of time.
Mm.
Something that
Yeah,
someone says to your face is a bit different to seeing it in print. And they may have
I
been
know.
quite
I
happy telling
know.
you things to your face. Then they see it in print and go like, "Oh, I don't like that being in print." And you can never predict what's going to set them off. So something you think is going to be quite trivial or not
Mm.
offensive, the person who's told you it might suddenly go, "Oh, don't think so." Another problem, of course, is that I still don't know Chris's life as well as Chris knows it. So
No.
anything I write is not going to be as knowledgeable about Chris Simpson as Chris Simpson himself is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had an interview earlier this year where when it was printed, the person who gave me the interview then read it and basically didn't like half of the things that she had actually said. She seemed
Mm,
to
mm.
be challenging my authenticity in what I'd put down,
Yeah.
um, and didn't recall various things that she did say. She had no recollection of having said them. And that
Mm,
was
mm.
bizarre. That was true. So anyway, I ended up just removing everything because I just didn't want an argument. It wasn't worth it. I didn't want to cause upset to her. But it's interesting that two very different recollections of that interview took place. And once she read it in print, she had a very different view of how she expressed herself in the interview. So your point's absolutely right. Right, that can happen.
Yeah. So when I finally let them see the first draft, it'll be with some slight trepidation.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be pretty soon. Just two chapters and an outro to do, and then that'll be done.
Mm. Certainly hope so. It's been
Yeah.
a real weight on my back. But then
Yeah,
again,
but
I did
Graham, I
volunteer.
think it's
I,
quite
I
something to.
volunteered for the job. No one likes someone who whinges about something that was partly their idea.
Yeah, well, this is true, and we've discussed this, on more than one occasion, on the podcast. But I actually think the creative process, when we sometimes, because we're both journalists, we do in the podcast look at the role of journalism. Here's actually a different development for you. It's going on because you've also done magazines. But here's it's a different style of writing. It's a much longer form of writing, and therefore it's interesting to actually reflect on how that plays out. So we will return to it at some point. In the meantime, I do feel it's time for an interruption before we perhaps come on to my main topic of the night. But let's have an interruption time, Graham.
This is a really stupid interruption, but we get sent
Yes,
as journalists emails from PR firms and companies in which they use
yes.
surveys and polls to like try and get you to like put the website contact to the product they're
Mm.
trying to flog. But the top line seems very interesting. So I got one recently about the greatest rebels of all time, which was conducted by a tequila brand, Maestro Dobel, of 2,000 people supposedly. This poll, and the number one rebel of all time, unsurprisingly, was Martin Luther King, which I thought that's quite predictable. And then you
Yeah,
got Nelson Mandela at number two, again quite predictable.
yeah.
You've got Greta Thunberg at number five, again quite predictable. John
Mm.
Lennon turns up as a musician. I think he's the highest musician. John Lennon's at number eight.
Yeah,
Johnny Rotten, the Sex Pistols, number 13. Banksy's there. Bowie's there at 14. And it's all looking quite good. You're thinking, like, that makes sense. And Germaine Greer, the great feminist writer of the 1970s, she's
mm.
there at 15, which I was quite
Yeah.
surprised about because Germaine's not been huge or current for quite a long time. But I thought that's
No.
good. She's a
Mm.
serious figure. But then what comes at number 16 is the greatest rebel of all time. Well, you've already got Bodicea. Now, well, Bodicea Great Rebel. I mean, that was a long time ago, if she actually
Yeah.
existed. But number 16, and he's the rebel of number 16, Sitting Bull, the great Sioux warrior. And I thought, there's no way that Sitting Bull can be a role model for the modern world. In what way can Sitting Bull be a role model? And I thought, who of the 2,000 people being polled has voted for Sitting Bull and
Exactly.
why?
That does it. You know how sometimes these things can be somehow manipulated and cheated, that people can contaminate polls. I'm not suggesting that this has happened, but seems an unlikely name. I wonder
Well,
when the
you
name
think
I wonder the name Sitting Bull was last mentioned by anybody in any conversation.
you think Adamant and the Ants have like gone online and filled in the form 100 times, 200 times to try and get Sitting Bull up there?
It has been known, and I don't intend to bring Leeds United into this for very long, but Leeds United fans have been known to interrupt things like polls on Player of the Year when a Leeds player's gone on loan to another club and has made sure that he won their Player of the Year. Or indeed, I think when Calvin Phillips was made Player of the tournament in the Euros, unless I'm much mistaken, I think it was Leeds United fans that just got on board and just vote after vote after vote,
He did have a
and it ended
great
up.
tournament.
He had I think
So
even greater according to Leeds fans. But I'm anyway. Sitting Bull. Yeah, I have to say, I can't think the last time those two words came out of my mouth. So
I
yeah,
think that being so high up the poll is basically a case of bull plus 4 extra letters at the end, if you know what I mean.
yeah, and three of which are already there in the sit word. So you're almost there.
Exactly. But I was going
So
to
thank
say,
you for that
Charles,
interruption.
before we move on to the films, I think you've seen, which I
Yeah,
haven't seen, which would be
that was
interesting
the
to talk
first thing I
about.
wanted to check with you, whether you had or
I
hadn't.
was
Right
gonna.
before that,
We,
anyway, Graham.
we need to mention Edinburgh Filmhouse at some point as well because it's quite important.
Yes, well, you can. Why not mention that now? Because that is
You
some
sure?
good news.
Well, you know that it
As to
closed down in
maybe actually
October.
these are the kind of films that will be shown there. So what have you heard?
You know Edinburgh's greatest art house cinema, apart from the Cameo, the Filmhouse, which opened in the 70s and has been the home of the International Film Festival for 40 years. And everything to do with films has happened there. And everybody famous in films has been there. It's just a great place, as you and me know, from having gone every year for about 30 years to the International Film Festival. Well, it went bankrupt along with the film festival itself in October 2022, put in administration. And it looked like the Filmhouse was finished, despite a campaign by Tilda Swinton and Mark Cousins and lots of other people. It looked like Influence was gone. But then it was bought by a company that owns restaurants, bars, and a theatre in Edinburgh. And that the last bit's the most important point, a theatre. And it seems like it may have a miraculous recovery because the new owners have agreed that a charity set up by 4 major figures from the Edinburgh Filmhouse, including Ginny Atkinson, who was chief executive of Edinburgh National Film Festival till about 2010, and I think we chatted to her briefly a few times. Well, they've come forward to take over the Filmhouse as a going concern as a cinema. And the company that owns it has said, yeah, if you can raise the money, do it. So they've given them a 6-month lease to try and raise £1 million to redevelop it still as a cinema with a bar cafe, with the intention and the hope of reopening in the summer of 2024.
But
of course, they have to raise the money. Yeah, but like all these things, A, they have to raise the money, and B, once they've raised the money and start the work into redoing the cinema and modernising it a little bit, I mean, these projects usually overrun. So I'm thinking like, it looks like it may be saved as a cinema, which would be absolutely fantastic. But will it actually reopen by next summer? I have my doubts. It's still good
depends.
news.
I mean, it does depend on how much redevelopment they seek to do. But we do know, from experience, when buildings are vacated, how quickly they
deteriorate.
Decrease in. They do. The deterioration is surprisingly rapid. It really is. And so you're right. It actually, that wants to be sorted out as soon as possible, really, to avoid that situation.
One interesting thing is the new owners have actually kept the original analog projectors and the projector system that shows films old style at the Filmhouse, and so the new owners have given that to the charity set up to try and resurrect the Filmhouse. So that's good news as well.
It is. Well, the kind of films that would hopefully be shown. It's of note, I think, uh, potentially The Last Oak is being talked about as Ken Loach's last film. I think it would surprise all if it were not the case. Um, Michael Caine has just announced that The Great Escaper is his last film. Of course, it is also now, therefore, the last film, not only of him, but also Glenda Jackson. And I think the last time I can remember, well, such significant people in film appearing together in a film in three was Montgomery Clift and Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable in The Misfits, who that was each of their last films. So that holds its place in cinema history. And the contrasting film to all that was a new filmmaker by the name of Mike Skinner. That is Mike Skinner of The Street. And he's had a tour of the Everyman cinemas, 13 of the cinemas, doing a Q&A each night, presenting his debut film, The Darker the Shadow, The Brighter the Light. And their debut film, which he's worked on for a very long time, it must be said.
Is it a
very
feature
long
film,
time.
Charles?
It is a feature film. He has so this is how much involvement he has had in it. He has funded it.
Oh.
He has written it.
Good
he
grief.
has directed it.
What?
He has starred in it. He
You're
has
joking.
edited it.
No
he
way.
Has scored it. And he's done the special effects.
Wait a minute. Is there no end to this man's talents?
Well, some might say, actually, on the evidence of the film, has he overstretched himself? It is, I guess, you would probably have to call it a passion project. I think if you're judging it, and we'll come on to the two very powerful films, this I don't want to just call it a vanity project or a passion project, but the reality is that I don't think any other filmmaker probably would be releasing this film. I think
really, is it that bad?
It's not a good piece of filmmaking. I don't think.
Oh dear.
Well, I mean, videos suit the world of music, and his great skill, combination of memorable images that he creates through language, and then of course at the same time videos have been very powerful in his work as well, plus of course the DJing skills that he has. And this is a wholly different challenge, and maybe it's over ambitious. It felt restricted. It felt there was plenty of ambition in what he was doing, but if you were going to be honest about it, did it work as a piece of filmmaking? I think it struggled to do that. Sometimes it was difficult to make out the dialogue. Sometimes the dialogue
like a music video?
Very, very.
What's the style of it?
So the style of it was it's set at it's basically and you would call it a nighttime piece. It's a piece of noir, a cinema noir. He is playing a DJ going on his night journey through London's nightclubs. And it turns into what has been described as a tripped out modern day murder mystery. Not maybe quite a Raymond Chandler type thing.
DJ Poirot.
a DJ Poirot. I think it's looking for a style, and that's more in the style of probably music video making. But I mean, if you were to, in York, we have filmmakers that have done films like Zombie that Miles Watts has put together, and I believe that kind of filmmaking is on a wholly different level of skill to this, and they are, but the reason I make the comparison with something like that is obviously it's not a vast budget that gets to work on a milestone film. It can't do, but they make what they have work really, really well. There was a sense with this that it was something that he really passionately wanted to do, and he wanted to do it in a way that wasn't conventional filmmaking, and yet still had its own manner, its own style, and of course the strongest suit in it remained the music. So these are songs that I was chatting afterwards with Phil Granger, who had been to concerts maybe 7 years ago of Mike Skinner's, where some of the songs that feature in this film were, I think, being unveiled at that time in that concert. What he's going to be doing as well, actually, is the film may hopefully, from his point of view, hopefully get released early next year. In the meantime, there will be concerts just to look out for. Leeds O2 Academy, November 4, Sheffield O2 Academy, October 28. And so what, I mean, why the evening was interesting because Skinner was there with Bella May, who's the lead actress in it, asking him questions afterwards, and then the audience joined in and asked questions. And that probably was the best part of the evening. And I think from his point of view, actually, that was very important for him to be able to express why he wanted to do filmmaking, what he felt he'd achieved with it,
Yeah.
where this might go next for him. So that side of it, I think, was of value. And the fact that he's taken it round 13 Everyman cinemas, he's putting the clock. He's putting the clock into action to go around and work hard, do his bit
Surely
to
that's
promote
part
the
of the
film.
problem. Filmmaking is a collaborative process in which you don't have one person with talent and everybody else not being very good, or one person dominating. You have to have like talent right across the whole range of different parts of a film. And surely with him doing everything, who could tell him that he got anything wrong? Because he was doing a lot.
I mean that is a valid point, and a kind of almost inevitable situation that is what it emerges. It's very much for him. It's about something he needed to do, and he's what, 44 now, and the last studio album was in 2011, 12 years ago.
Yeah,
so this has been
out though. There's a new one coming out though. New album.
Yeah, but that's the album that's these songs from this album.
Yeah,
from this film.
But there are some new. Yeah, but there are some new songs. They're not just old classics.
No, they're entirely freshly written. Well, I say freshly
Yeah,
written, but actually, if you think how long he's been working on this project, they're new from the point of view of being released. Yes, so they're not. So he doesn't. There's none of his classic songs are there. These are it's all new material within the film, and I thought that side of it probably was what works strongest within it, which comes as no surprise.
He does like pushing things forward. But it sounds to me like this is his version of Paul McCartney's "Give My Regards to Broad Street" film.
Yes, that's a good call, Graham. I can see why you would make that comparison. I mean, to want to do something new, I admire him for that. Just to tick over DJing and whatever, it isn't completely fulfilling for him. He wanted to take on a new challenge. He strongly believed in doing this. I just think there are very strong limitations to this film as a film. I can't in any way say it's a great piece of work. I think it's a novelty. I think he'll have fans that want to see it. But I as a piece of filmmaking, I do think maybe it would have benefited from having some people alongside him, just giving him some advice.
There's very few filmmakers who've been directors and screenwriters and actors in the same project. And it's very, very turned out well. I mean, the only two that I can think of are Kenneth Branagh, who's done that a few times in the past with reasonable success, and the biggest example is Orson Welles. But you've got to think Mike Skinner, for all his talents with the spoken word and great music career, he's never going to be Orson Welles.
No, he's not. He's not. So now the contrasting films are probably going to be the last film for Ken Loach, and definitely now the last film for Michael Caine. You haven't seen either of these yet, then, Graham? So I'm sorry, it's going to be rather self-indulgent with me, sort of.
Did you see the Michael Caine one's called The Great Escape?
So I saw The Great Escaper last night. It's largely.
I'm thinking like the title's a bit of a cheat because basically it's The Great Escape with one extra letter. So you might as well have a new film called Taxi Drivers, i.e., Taxi Driver with the S stuck on the end.
I think the title came about from a news story at the time that it broke that this man, aged 90, had gone on his own whim to France to revisit where he had the D-Day landing that he had taken part in. And I think there were newspaper headlines that called it The Great Escaper at the time. So I think that's why it was used. It read like a newspaper headline.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting decision to call Time on a Career. It's been a career where he's had some magnificent films, but he'd be the first to admit also that he's done films that aren't great, but he's just been prolific over the years. It's an extraordinary number of films that he's made.
Every decade, when you think he's off the boil, he comes up with 2 or 3 great films and great performances that have been hits as well. He's been extraordinary for such a long time.
But I think he's judged this really well on this film, because it's a film. So it's directed by Oliver Parker. Now, if you think that Oliver Parker's done Dorian Gray, St. Trinian's, the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, he's done Dad's Army, he's done Johnny English, he's done The Importance of Being Earnest.
I like Johnny English.
He's done An Ideal Husband. So if you look at this, he is. We did that one, Nuns on the Run. So basically, he is, by definition, a very, very English filmmaker. Is Oliver Parker?
You're not joking.
He gets Englishness. I mean, Dad's Army, obviously, you can sort of, I do not want in any way to make a comparison between old guys in Dad's Army and this character, the character Bernie Jordan, played by Michael Caine, being an old guy. It's a film, initially, I think the script slightly clunky, but the more the film progresses, it becomes a beautiful piece on aging, not appreciating old people, but also his individuality within that and his determination to do it. So, although we talked about the Jim Broadbent film where off he goes from one end of the country to another. Do you remember that?
I remember that discussion.
Yeah. So this film is so much better than that film, because although you have the same situation that suddenly he's being covered by the newspapers, and you've got TV channels covering the story. In that Jim Broadbent film, all that became very cliched. In this, it was very apparent he wanted none of that. That wasn't what he was about. He did quite like the free bar of chocolate the massive bar of chocolate that he got, but so I thought it caught the character's flavour.
Well, I interviewed a few war veterans from the Second World War who'd taken part in D-Day. I think I've interviewed 3 of them in the last 6 or 7 years, and it's sad. I think they've all now gone because they were fairly old. And all 3 of them, who'd been very brave men in the horrors of D-Day and beyond at the landings, were all completely modest and had absolutely no concept of themselves as being heroes in any way whatsoever. And they were great individuals, but they had no ego about what they'd done.
So Bernie Jordan, it's a true story, and that he was the reverse of thinking he was a hero. He had never forgiven himself for kind of encouraging another young soldier who was going to be leading off from the boat onto the land in a tank, and he blamed him for kind of the guy getting bullish about doing it. Well, so he was beating himself up for all these years about the fact that he felt, in some ways he'd let that man down, that young, a boy really, I mean, maybe 18, 19 or whatever. And of course that was not the case, but that's how he felt. And that's what I loved about this story, the burden of something that you go through and you feel guilt all these years about something. And that you were the one who survived and the other person didn't. I thought the film beautifully told that. The other important factor is the performance by Glenda Jackson within it, who plays his wife. They meet basically across a dance floor. He's a soldier from the south. She's a northern girl, but they marry for 70 years, whatever, and they're in an old people's home at the point of the film story is being told, although there are flashbacks both to their relationship, how it started, and also, so you've got love and also the hatred of war, so you've got those 2 elements. But her performance, again, I mean, she I think died around about 9 months after the filming was completed, and it was made under COVID conditions, so quite difficult actually from that point of view even to make the film. But again, her performance as a career valedictory, it's a beautifully played. It reminded you, I was so pleased that she came back to acting after her very prestigious political career. To see her talent again in old age performing like that was wonderful. I mean, you could make comparisons with something like On Golden Pond from the point of view of watching older actors still being marvelous. I mean, but last time I think that was the case with Caine, where it was really apparent, was in that film we did with Harvey Keitel called Youth, and again that was about old age, and that worked really, really well too. When it comes to old age,
I was going to say, Charles, before we're out of time to talk about The Old Dog, Is it actually a better film in some ways than The Old Oak by Ken Loach?
I think it's more surprising than The Last Oak. I think I think that the Ken Loach one, it's a very typical Ken Loach film, but again, you would want young filmmakers to grasp the potential of filmmaking to make political points in the way that he does, and I just wonder where those kind of filmmakers are. And it's still Ken Loach that's doing that, and it's playing it's all the familiar tropes, if you like, of what Ken Loach believes in. But for him to be doing it for one last time and doing it with such conviction, this is a story. It's a combination, a meeting between a pub landlord who's struggling to keep the pub open. It's in a town that was a village that was a mining village. No life there at all, no money there, and some Syrian refugees that move in, and it's the attitudes that contrast between some of the pub regulars who take the view up, foreigners out, and the pub landlord who takes a very different attitude. And it's beautifully put together with typical Ken Loach. I think the feeling he always has is, why can't more people behave like this? I think his films are often pleas, but just can't we be better human beings? Why? What stops us doing this?
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.